help me say, how great is our God. Sing with me, how great.
He's a 3-time Grammy Award winner with more than 10 million albums sold worldwide. Donnie McClurkin shares his story and how he's able to sustain his career. Take a look.
Everybody join with me and say, how great, how great.
I guess the only way I can account for the sustaining the momentum is God. That's the only thing that I can attribute it to. It has nothing to do with me, but it has everything to do with me being aware that I'm just a vessel that he uses to funnel his thoughts through music to people. After you finish, you hang it up in the closet and you go about your way. Once I finish, I remember that it was God that did it and not me.
From an early age, he always knew he wanted to sing.
I realized the calling when I was 9. From that point on, music was my whole passion. Music and church. That was all I lived for.
And he remembers distinctly hearing music by the Winans for the first time.
My aunt, her name was B. Carr, and Aunt B used to sing with Andre Crouch. One day Aunt B came home from tour, and usually she would have postcards that Andre would send me. But this time she had a cassette, and it was 4 boys from Detroit, Michigan, called the Winans. And my whole family sat in the living room and we listened to this cassette. And the question is, will I ever leave you? The answer is no, 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 no. And when we heard that, we had never heard gospel like that before in our lives. In 1982, they came to Brooklyn, New York. And they did a Thanksgiving night concert. And I didn't even know that there were 10 of them. I only thought that there were the 4 brothers. But the 10 kids, they all came and they all sang. And then on that Friday, they had a workshop. And me and my sister Andrea went to the workshop. And at the end of the workshop, they said, we're going to formulate a choir. And when they said they was going to formulate the choir, I said, come on, let's go. And they called us and said, where y'all going? I said, we're going home. Pastor Winer said, you 2 tall people, come and sing in the choir. He bullied us. Bullying. Bullying didn't just start with the internet. Bullying started with Marvin Winans. I want you to know that. And we sang, and he said, we're going to sing a song 4 we may never know. Does anybody know the song? The director said, that tall boy probably knows it. And that's how me and Marvin Winans became like this. We sang that night, and the Holy Spirit moved like crazy. And then in 1987, we did a Broadway play together called Don't Get God Started. And it was the first gospel play on Broadway. Kim Fields was in it, Chip Fields was in it, Giancarlo Esposito, Glenn Turman, and the list goes on and on. We did that for 2 years, and then Pastor Winans said he was going to Detroit to pastor a church. I said, I'm going back to New York. I went back to New York for 2 weeks. And then the Lord moved on me, and I called Pastor Winans up. I said, Marvin, well, we called him Peanut. I said, Peanut, I feel homesick for Detroit, and I never lived there. He said, I'm going to tell you how much I knew you were going to call. There is a one-way ticket waiting for you for the last 2 weeks at Northwest Airlines. Go pick that ticket up, bid everybody goodbye. We got a work to build here. I picked up, told everybody goodbye, and moved to Detroit, stayed there for 12 years. And that's when I became the 11th Winans. But B.B. Winans, really more than anybody else, B.B. Winans was used by God to push me forward. And that man was so unselfish. He introduced me to Oprah. I go down to the Bahamas. I'm in my room, and the telephone rings. I pick up the phone, and I hear, Donnie McClurkin. And I'm saying, who is this? She said, this is Oprah Winfrey. She must have talked to me for about 30 minutes and asked me to do something on something that she was doing coming up. She stood on television, held up the CD and said, this is my favorite CD and this is my favorite artist, Donnie McClurkin, and he's anointed and he's going to sing my favorite song with my friend B.B. Winans, Stand.
I'm going to say it one more time for anybody who feels like you've fallen. Say, you can get back up again. Get back up again. Get back up again. Get back up again.
Well, maybe several months later, we went from 30,000 to 300,000 till the thing shot up through the roof and sold maybe over 1 million copies of the first solo project I ever did. And all of these things just started snowballing. Everything just started to snowball. And consequently, I'm sitting here doing this interview now.
Coming up, we highlight one of gospel music's shining stars.
'Cause back when I was 17, like every other girl, I used to have big dreams. But then
Stay with
I
us.
got introduced to some other things.